Wasn't sure if I was going to do a Morning Pitt this morning. We just had a post-game show last night. Talked for a solid 80 or 90 minutes or so about Pitt's loss to Toledo in the GameAbove Sports Bowl yesterday. And we talked a lot about it. I think we covered a lot of ground. We covered all the important facts and data and relevant storylines, of which there were many, which you would expect when it's a game that goes for 4 hours and 38 minutes was the official duration of that marathon game yesterday with 6 overtimes. Of course, Pitt losing to Toledo 48-46 in the 6th overtime. And so I thought, we did the live show, did the post-game show. Do we need to do a Morning Pitt on top of that? Something else to throw in? Yeah, we do. I think you guys, if you're so inclined, you will catch up on the Morning Pitt, or you'll catch up with the post-game show. And if you're so inclined, you'll listen to the Morning Pitt. And ideally, you'll listen to both. And we hope you do that and get all of our content here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and Panther-Lair.com, everywhere that we've got Pitt stuff for you in the wake of Pitt's loss to Toledo. An unfortunate defeat. Not one that was entirely unpredictable, but it looked at points like it was unlikely. Looked like Pitt would pull this one out. They fell behind. Certainly didn't look great. They were down 20-12 at one point, and then rattled off 18 unanswered points to go up 30-30. 30-20. Toledo cut that lead down with a pick six and a field goal, and the game ended up going to overtime. The details of all of that you are well aware of and very familiar with, and probably don't want to recount all that much, but I feel like it's due diligence to at least get to that point before we start really breaking this game down, because it was a whole new game in overtime, of course. With obviously the circumstances of play in overtime and the rules and kind of what you have to do in that situation, it's going to be a little bit unique. But the reality is there were a lot of chances here for Pitt to win this game. There are a lot of opportunities for Pitt to win yesterday, and while 8-5 wouldn't be anything special, it's sure a lot better than 7-6 and a 6-game losing streak. And, I talked yesterday about how you could hand wave a lot of things away about that game. Depending on your perspective going into it, you could say, hey, they were down to their fourth and ultimately fifth string quarterback. They were missing this guy, missing that guy. None of it is going to change what happened over the course of the 12 regular season games. None of it is going to change your perception of the team from those 12 regular season games. I highly doubt there was anyone who, I thought going into yesterday's game that there would be very few people who would come out of the game saying, I'm either sold on Pat Narduzzi or I am done with Pat Narduzzi. I didn't think yesterday's game had the power or potential to really change anything in anyone's perspective about the season, about the program, about the coaching staff, or anything. But then the game ended up happening, and I was reminded once again that I should never rule out the possibility of a game being so ridiculous, with so many different angles and storylines and elements that, you can always find something to push forward a narrative. And I gotta say, there weren't a lot of positive narratives to push forward. Actually, I shouldn't say that, because there were some positive narratives to push forward coming out of yesterday's games, but certainly some big concerns. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the good. Let's talk about the bad. We will definitely emphasize the bad, but we will emphasize the good as well, because I think there was plenty that came out of yesterday's game. You say, you know what? That's a good thing for next year. I didn't think we would have any takeaways from yesterday's game going into it. I didn't think there would be anything we would look at and say, all right, that's going to be a harbinger of things to come, or that's going to have an impact on next season. But there actually ended up being a handful of things that I said, that's good to know for next year. That could help them next year. But of course, the details of the game itself, there's a lot more things that you say, boy, what were they thinking? And of course, one really big one where I think you already know that I'm going to say, what were they thinking? Because I yelled about it quite a bit on the post-game show last night. All right, let's dive into it. Let's talk about the GameAbove Sports Bowl, a 6-overtime classic, a 48-46 loss for Pitt. Actually, I shouldn't say it's a classic. It's not going to be a classic. Toledo might consider it a classic, but they have an interesting perspective on things themselves. So 48-46, Pitt wins the game of, or Pitt loses the GameAbove Sports Bowl to Toledo. Well, let's talk about what happened in that game and what maybe some of our big takeaways are here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, let's talk about this game. You know the deal. You know what I always ask you to do. Like this video and subscribe so we don't have to bother wasting too much time on that. We can dive into the conversation about this loss yesterday, last night. It went on a really long time. It started at 2. It was almost 7 o'clock when that game finally ended. But let's talk about it. Look, we'll get it right out of the way. They absolutely should have gone for it on 4th and goal from the 1. Period, point blank. No question about it. No hesitation. No, I mean, entirely second guessing. It's all second guessing because they should have gone for it. And there was no reason not to. There was no reason not to try to score the touchdown there and win the game. There was no reason to kick a field goal from the 1 so you could then turn around and attempt to score a touchdown from the 3. Would you rather try a touchdown from the 1 or the 3? Which one seems more favorable? But I'm preaching to the choir. There's no one listening to this podcast right now, watching this video right now, who thinks, no, man, they should have kicked it there. They made the right call. Unless Pat Narduzzi's watching this, and I highly doubt that he is. Even he, though, might have to, in retrospect, say, did I make the right decision? He might not say that publicly, but even he has to recognize that that was not the right call. I didn't hate the fact that they were direct snapping to the tight end and having him throw a pass to the redshirt freshman defensive tackle. I didn't hate that because actually I was going to let the ends justify the means on that one because the play was there. The play was open. It was a good play call. It was a good play design. Toledo never saw it coming. Never thought that redshirt freshman defensive tackle would be going out into the flat for a pass. But there he was. And it was wide open. Gavin Bartholomew just had to hit Isaiah Neal right in the chest. Right in the old breadbasket, you know? Right in the belly, right in the chest. Neal would catch it. Touchdown. Game over. But he threw it too high. Now, we're not going to come here and bash Gavin Bartholomew. Gavin Bartholomew made a huge catch in a later overtime. It was an NFL caliber catch. He got 2 feet down the way that some NFL receivers failed to, figure out. It was a great play. It was a great catch by Gavin Bartholomew. Shout out to him. I'm not going to give him any flack. He was being asked to throw a pass for the first time, maybe since high school, and in the biggest moment, of the game. And, the last gasp to salvage a win out of this season. And so I'm not going to bash him too much for it. I thought it was a decent play call. He just missed the throw. But then when it's 4th and goal from the 1, and you got Bartholomew you can put in the Wildcat again, which you got 3 yards out of one play earlier, because it was, 2nd and goal from the 4, and they got 3 yards to get 3rd and goal from the 1, and that's when they threw the pass. So you could go with Bartholomew in the Wildcat again. You could go with Desmond Reed in the Wildcat. You could go with Kenny Johnson in the Wildcat. You could go with Julian Duggar playing quarterback, handing off or running or handing on a sweep. There were a lot of things you could have done there to give yourself a chance to win the game. And a lot of things that, not just options for plays, but options for plays that you actually had been executing well. The jet sweeps were hitting. Kenny Johnson had a good game running jet sweeps. Gavin Bartholomew, again, ran for 3 yards the first time he took a snap out of the Wildcat. Julian Duggar ran for over 100 yards. He ended up with a net 88 because of the sack total coming off his total, but he had over 100 yards rushing. Desmond Reed obviously had a huge game. He was, he would have been the player of the game for Pitt if they had won. He would have been the game MVP. So he had a great game. I mean, all of these things were working in the game. And instead of doing one of those things, choosing one of those things that had been so successful the whole game, and winning, they kick a field goal to go play in overtime. And now, instead of trying to get in the end zone from the 1, they're trying to get in from the 3. I don't get that. I don't understand it. I don't know what the point is. I don't. And that was a major misstep. That was a major faux pas. It wasn't the only one. It might not have, it probably was the biggest one. I was going to say it might not have been the biggest one, but it probably was the biggest one. It was a major screw up in a situation where the game was there to be won. But it wasn't the only situation where the game was there to be won. Because after Pitt went up 30-20, they decided to keep throwing the ball in the 4th quarter. And they throw a pick 6 with their true freshman quarterback who made a mistake. You make mistakes. Then the score 30-27, time winding down, under 5 minutes to go. Pitt's defense is on the field and forces a 4th and 6 with less than 3 minutes on the clock from the Toledo 40. This is the play of the game. This is the chance to get off the field, give the ball back to your offense, and run the clock out. And on 4th and 6, from the 40 with 2 minutes and 41 seconds, or 2 minutes and 51 seconds left in the game, one of Toledo's two really good receivers, or two best receivers, the guys that they throw to all the time, Vander Ross and Newton, one of those two guys, number 2, makes a catch for 7 yards. Actually, for 27 yards. Huge play to get a first down, which ultimately ends up leading to a field goal. And this happened multiple times in this game where those two receivers found themselves open in crucial situations. On the last 2 overtime scores, it was those two guys. Now, how you let those two guys get away from you, how you let those two guys get open, is a failure of defensive scheme. It's a failure of defensive game plan. It's a failure of preparation. It's a failure of play calling. It's a failure of execution. Anything that you can do defensively failed in those moments where you let those two guys beat you. Now, good players, you're not going to always shut them down. You know, the one guy, I think Newton, is Toledo's all-time leader in receiving touchdowns. You know, like, they're good players. They're going to get theirs. They don't need to get theirs to the tune of 20 catches for almost 300 yards, which is what those two ended up with combined. It's a failure of defense. So even though Pitt's defense only gave up 2 offensive touchdowns in regulation, which is true, Toledo scored 4 touchdowns in regulation. 2 of them were pick sixes. Toledo only scored 2 offensive touchdowns in regulation, which is a credit to the defense. There were big moments where the defense needed to step up and make a play, and they failed to do so. 4th and 6 in the final 3 minutes of the game certainly counts as one. Then the first overtime. Pitt comes out and scores in the first overtime. Toledo's got the ball. First play of Toledo's overtime drive, they get a sack. The only sack of the game. But Francis Brew gets through and gets to Tucker Gleason for an 8-yard sack. You think, okay, they are in business. They are going to win this. It's going to be slim. It's going to be 37-30, but they are going to win this. Until Gleason scrambles for 15 yards on the next play. They still end up forcing a 4th and 3, and guess who catches a pass for 6 yards? Number 1. I think that one was Vander Ross, or maybe that one was Newton. I don't know. All I know is that those two guys cannot beat you. You cannot let those guys beat you. The tight end will always be there to beat you. You know, we know Pitt's defense. We know that the tight end will always be available as an option to beat you. At least you can focus on shutting down the top receivers. But instead that, you know, the one guy, I think number 1, is like catching passes against a linebacker. How do you let Toledo get the matchups on you like that? How do you let Toledo dictate the matchups and end up with their best receiver on a linebacker? Even a linebacker like Kyle Lewis, an All-American linebacker. How do you let that happen? Major mistake. And they end up giving up a touchdown on that drive. And then after that, you know, they force a field goal and then give up a score on every subsequent overtime period for Toledo. There are a lot of moments where Pitt could have won that game yesterday. And a lot of moments where they lost that game yesterday. Defense takes some of the blame. Offense takes some of the blame. Now, that's the bad. And that 4th and goal from the 1 was really, really bad. But there were a few things. And look, we're only going to talk another 5 or 10 minutes here. So let's talk about some of the things that maybe were a little encouraging. And I know I can't bring up the first one without you saying, well, why wasn't he playing from the start then? But Julian Duggar. I mean, what a performance. What a debut performance. What a breakout game. It was the JDBOG, the JD Bog, the Julian Duggar breakout game. And I know breakout is one word, but I want to say it is BOG anyway because it looks cooler than BG. Just an outstanding performance. And like, yeah, it is absolutely a valid question of why Julian Duggar wasn't the starting quarterback to begin this game. You want to tell me that, well, he was, you know, it was okay to play Nate Yarnell ahead of him in those games when Eli Holstein was hurt in the regular season? Okay, that's fine. Yarnell's a redshirt junior. He's an older guy. He's been on the field a lot. He's got more experience. But there was no reason for David Lynch to start over Julian Duggar. And that's no disrespect to David Lynch, but I cannot possibly, like, unless Julian Duggar is just an absolute disaster in practice, which I have a hard time imagining that that's the case, but unless that's the case, I don't see any reason that you could start or should start David Lynch over him. And again, no disrespect to David Lynch, but it was readily apparent who's the playmaker out of those two. And I thought David Lynch actually, like, early going, did a decent job. I thought he was solid. Took what the defense gave him, made some easy passes, short passes, quick stuff, just to try to, take what was there. And he was able to move the ball down the field a decent amount doing that. He made some mistakes, which obviously hurt Pitt. One of them turned into a pick six. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, if Julian Duggar had started the game, then they definitely would have won, because who knows, maybe Duggar makes those mistakes too. He's just as inexperienced as Lynch is, and he threw a pick six himself. So who's to say he doesn't throw those other interceptions as well? So I'm not going to say starting Julian Duggar guarantees a victory, but I think he's the better option. I think that's pretty obvious that he is. And I'm surprised that they didn't go with him from the start. But eventually they figured out he is the better option, let him play, and he made plays. He made plays running. He made some nice throws. He showed some poise. The pressure got to him, and he had to scramble at times. But sometimes when he was scrambling, he made some really nice plays. The touchdown to Kenny Johnson in overtime. I think it was a touchdown, or maybe that was one of the 2-point conversions. It was a great play. I think it was one of the 2-point conversions. But it was a great play. It was a heady play. He had his poise. He scrambled. He kept his eyes in the end zone and found Kenny Johnson all by himself. It was a great play. And obviously with his legs, he was running really, really well. He's got that escapability that if the pressure comes in and the pocket breaks down, he's able to get out of the pocket and move around and make plays, either running or throwing. I came out of the game saying, holy cow, they've got a good quarterback here. And, I think Eli Holstein's still QB1 heading into next season. But with Julian Duggar on the roster, I think you have your insurance policy in the event that Holstein gets hurt. And you have a guy who you could bring in for packages. I don't see anything wrong with using Julian Duggar every now and then to take the snap and make something happen. I could see that. And I said this last night on the post-game show. If it's... the staff had been looking at backup quarterbacks out of the transfer portal, if they're, kind of considering those options, I think the need for that lessened after last night's game, because I think you have a quality backup quarterback on the roster right now in Julian Duggar. I think it was a revelation, and it was probably the best thing to come out of that game. The only other thing that would make a case for being the best thing to come out of that game was Desmond Reed. Desmond Reed has been awesome all season long. He's been outstanding for Pitt. Right from the jump, from the Kent State game, he was really good. He was their best player on offense, probably their second best player on the team, behind only Kyle Lewis on the whole season. And he was just outstanding last night. And he put in the work. And he took a beating, and he touched the ball a lot. What was the final stat count here? Pitt ran... total plays, 98 total plays. Desmond Reed touched the ball on 37 of them. So more than a third of Pitt's total offensive plays, the ball was going to Desmond Reed. And that was with him missing a decent amount of overtime due to injury. So, but he was just outstanding. And I still maintain, he is probably the most exciting player to wear a Pitt uniform since LaShawn McCoy. And I'm not saying he's on McCoy's level, and I don't mean to dismiss James Conner and Aaron Donald and Tyler Boyd and all these guys. Like, they've had some good players, some exciting players, but nobody has been as exciting as Desmond Reed with that kind of game-breaking ability since LaShawn McCoy. He's just that outstanding, and he's going to be coming back for another year. And so I think you got a pretty good reminder, in case your memory had faded a little bit of how good Reed was, in the last few games. Maybe you sort of forgot about it a little bit. He showed it again last night. He showed how good he is, and it was fun to watch. I think that was a positive. Joels Goff made some plays too. If you want to feel a little encouraged about next year, I think you can feel encouraged about the play of Eli Holstein, who had a whole lot to do with Pitt's first 5 wins at the very least, if not the first 7. You can feel encouraged about Desmond Reed. You can feel encouraged about Joels Goff, who I think looked really good. You can feel encouraged about the emergence of Julian Duggar. You can feel encouraged about the linebackers who are all coming back and the young defensive linemen who are coming back. I think there are things to like about this team for next year. They're not without their holes, and they certainly have some things they need to address out of the transfer portal, particularly the offensive line, which they've already gotten one. They'll try to get a few more to fill out the starting lineup and the depth. But if as they work to address that, I think there's a solid core on this team, a solid foundation of players they're bringing back from the 2024 team that should help this team be better and good in 2025. I know that can be a tough sell after a 6-game losing streak. I know it can be a tough sell after you watch the 7-0 season turn into 7-6. Pretty considerable disappointment, all caveats aside. It was a considerable disappointment. One I didn't see coming. And yeah, like there are definitely the pessimists in the fan base who saw it coming, but those people predict Pitt to lose every game. So, they're going to be right at some point. And if you just keep predicting that they're going to lose and then they run into the issues that they had this year, then it's even more, predictable, I guess. But I think most people didn't expect this team to lose 6 in a row. And it's disappointing, and there should be some soul searching on the part of the coaching staff, but also maybe some prayers for healthy offensive linemen, because that can go a long way as well. But that's it. Pitt football 2024 is officially over, maybe mercifully, depending on how you look at things. But it's officially over. And now it's all about the transfer portal. It's all about adding more players. It's all about filling out the offensive line, getting another wide receiver, potentially a pass rusher. It's all about building this team for next year so they have a better chance to avoid what happened this year. And then, of course, it's also all about basketball. Pitt basketball 10-2 heading into the ACC schedule, which starts next Wednesday. New Year's Day is the first game of the ACC schedule, of the full ACC schedule, when they play Cal at home. So we've got a lot to talk about there. Either way, we're going to have a lot of Pitt coverage at Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you stay tuned to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to get all your Pitt sports coverage. And then, of course, video content right here at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. I hope you've had a good week this week. It was a holiday week. Despite the bowl game yesterday, it was a holiday week, so hopefully it was a good one for you. Enjoy this weekend. We're heading into the end of the year. We'll be back with our year-end wrap-up episodes on the Morning Pitt next week, so make sure you tune in for that. It should be fun. Enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday for the Morning Pitt right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.